Before history learned to write, something else learned to build. Across deserts, mountains, and forgotten jungles, colossal structures still stand, precise, enduring, and disturbingly advanced for the ages that produced them. Stone cut harder than steel tools should allow, blocks weighing hundreds of tons, placed with mathematical certainty, no clear records, no consensus, only questions. Who designed these monuments, and how did they master techniques we struggle to replicate today? Were these achievements lost to time, or deliberately erased? We step beyond accepted timelines and comfortable explanations and look closely at the ancient structures that challenge everything we think we know about human capability. At the edge of Peru's Soup Valley, where the desert meets a narrow ribbon of green fed by seasonal rivers, the land rises into broad, stepped forms of stone and earth. From a distance, they resemble natural hills, weathered, muted, almost reluctant to draw attention. But as the light shifts and the shapes sharpen, their geometry becomes unmistakable. These are the Pyramids of Caral, massive human-made structures standing quietly in one of the oldest known cities in the Americas. Caral dates back nearly 5,000 years, making it roughly contemporary with the pyramids of Egypt and the earliest cities of Mesopotamia. When archaeologists began systematic excavations in the late 20th century, the discovery challenged long-held assumptions about how and when complex societies emerged in the New World. There were no signs of warfare here, no defensive walls, no weapons, no mass graves. Instead, the city appears to have been organized around ceremonial spaces, sunken circular plazas, stepped pyramids, and carefully planned residential zones. The largest structures dominate the valley floor, rising in terraced layers that suggest deliberate design rather than organic growth. Some pyramids stretch hundreds of feet across, built from stone-filled bags stacked with remarkable consistency. Radiocarbon dating places their construction far earlier than previously imagined, at a time when many believed societies in the region were still small, nomadic, and technologically limited. What makes Caral particularly intriguing is what appears to be missing. There is no pottery, no written language, no clear iconography carved into stone. And yet, the city functioned. Trade networks extended to the coast and the highlands. Musical instruments made from bird bones have been uncovered, hinting at ritual or ceremonial life. The alignment of certain structures suggests an awareness of astronomy, possibly tied to seasonal cycles or agricultural planning. Mainstream archaeology views Caral as a peaceful, theocratic society, one that relied on shared belief systems and economic cooperation rather than force. Its leaders may have governed through ritual authority, using monumental architecture to reinforce social cohesion and cosmological order. In this interpretation, the pyramids were not tombs or fortresses, but stages for ceremony, sound, and spectacle. Still, questions linger. The precision of the layout, the scale of labor required, and the speed with which the city developed leave room for debate. How did a society without ceramics or metal tools organize such complex construction projects? What systems of knowledge were passed down, and how were they preserved without writing? Some researchers have suggested that Caral's planners possessed advanced mathematical or astronomical understanding that has yet to be fully reconstructed. Others point to the acoustics of the sunken plazas, proposing that sound, music, chanting, or rhythmic movement played a central role in shaping collective experience. More speculative theories consider whether Caral represents the remnant of an even older tradition, one that influenced later Andean civilizations but left few traces of its origins. There are also broader questions about why Caral was eventually abandoned. Climate shifts, changes in river patterns, or economic disruption may have played a role. But no single explanation fully accounts for the city's quiet decline. Unlike societies that fall through conquest or collapse, Caral seems to have faded, leaving its structures intact but its people absent. Today, the pyramids stand exposed to wind and time, their surfaces marked by erosion yet still commanding the valley. They do not announce their secrets. They simply endure. And as researchers continue to map, excavate, and analyze, each answer seems to open another uncertainty. In a landscape that once pulsed with sound and ceremony, the silence now invites a question that remains unresolved. How much of Caral's story have we truly uncovered? And how much is still buried beneath the sand? As the dust of the Soup Valley settles in the mind and the quiet geometry of Caral fades into memory, our journey moves north and east, across continents, climates, and centuries. The mystery does not diminish with distance. It changes shape. In southern Siberia, near the borderlands of Mongolia, a cold, shallow lake called Terra cradles an island of stone. From above, it appears almost deliberate, as if placed with intention rather than chance. Rectangular walls rise from the water, enclosing courtyards, gates, and the faint outlines of long-vanished buildings. This is Por-Bazhyn, a structure as isolated as it is perplexing. The island fortress sits in the Republic of Tuva, a remote region of taiga, mountains, and permafrost. For much of the year, the lake freezes solid, locking Por-Bazhyn in silence. When explorers first documented the site in the 18th century, they struggled to explain it. Its layout did not resemble local settlements. Its scale seemed excessive for its surroundings, and its location, on an island far from major population centers, raised immediate questions. Archaeological investigations have dated Por-Bazhyn to the mid-8th century CE, during the height of the Uyghur Khaganate, a powerful nomadic empire that ruled much of Central Asia. Carbon dating of wooden beams supports this timeline, and the architectural style, straight walls, axial symmetry, a central courtyard, bears resemblance to Tang Dynasty Chinese designs. This has led many scholars to suggest that Por-Bazhyn was built under Uyghur ruler Bayanchur Khan, possibly with Chinese craftsmen or influence. But knowing when it was built does not explain why. The fortress-like walls suggest defense, yet there is little evidence of prolonged habitation. Hearths are scarce. Tools and everyday objects are minimal. The site shows no clear signs of siege or destruction, and yet it appears to have been abandoned not long after completion. Why invest such effort into a structure that was barely used? Some mainstream theories propose that Por-Bazhyn was a palace, perhaps a summer residence, or an administrative center meant to project authority in a remote region. Others suggest it may have been a Buddhist or Manichaean monastery, aligned with the Uyghur elite's shifting religious beliefs. The internal layout, with its courtyards and possible ceremonial halls, supports these interpretations, at least in part. Still, the unanswered details persist. The island's unstable ground, affected by permafrost and seismic activity, would have made long-term use difficult. Was this known to its builders? Or did environmental changes come later, rendering the site uninhabitable? Geological studies indicate that earthquakes may have damaged the structure early on, but whether this caused its abandonment remains unclear. More speculative perspectives take note of Por-Bazhyn's orientation and isolation. The fortress is precisely aligned along cardinal directions, a feature often associated with cosmological or ritual significance. Its reflection in the lake, its separation from the mainland, and its closed geometry have led some to wonder whether it served a symbolic purpose, less a place to live, and more a place to mark something intangible. Was Por-Bazhyn a statement of power meant to be seen rather than used? A ceremonial enclosure tied to seasonal rites? Or a political experiment that failed before it could begin? Unlike cities that evolve over generations, Por-Bazhyn feels paused in time. It does not show layers of adaptation or reuse. It stands as if frozen at the moment its builders left, preserving intention without explanation. Today, drones and satellite imagery reveal its clean lines against the dark water, while archaeologists continue to debate its purpose. Each theory accounts for part of the evidence, but none fully resolve the contradiction between effort and emptiness, precision and impermanence. As with Caral, Por-Bazhyn reminds us that complexity does not always leave clear answers. Some structures outlast the stories meant to explain them. And as the wind moves across the frozen lake and through the broken walls, one question remains quietly suspended. Was Por-Bazhyn ever meant to be understood, or only witnessed? And west. From the frozen stillness of Por-Bazhyn, where stone walls rise from dark water and purpose remains uncertain, the journey continues, south and west, across continents and climates, to a landscape shaped not by ice, but by wind, sun, and deep time. The mystery follows us, not bound to one culture or region, but repeating in different forms wherever humans once built beyond what seems necessary or explainable. In the high desert of northwestern New Mexico, a vast canyon cuts through layers of sandstone and shale. At first glance, Chaco Canyon appears stark and empty, an arid expanse of mesas, dry washes, and wide open sky. The air is thin and quiet, broken only by wind moving through stone. Yet scattered along the canyon floor and tucked beneath towering cliffs are the remains of one of the most complex and enigmatic societies in ancient North America. These are the great houses of Chaco. Built between roughly 850 and 1150 CE by the Ancestral Puebloans, Chaco Canyon was not a single settlement, but a carefully planned cultural and ceremonial center. Massive stone complexes, some rising 5 stories high and containing hundreds of rooms, stand in deliberate relation to one another. Pueblo Bonito, the largest of these structures, curves in a precise D shape, its walls aligned with cardinal directions, its core anchored by large ceremonial spaces known as great kivas. The scale alone is striking. In a region with limited water, scarce timber, and harsh seasonal extremes, Chaco's builders quarried sandstone blocks, shaped them with remarkable consistency, and hauled massive wooden beams from forests more than 50 miles away. These timbers, ponderosa pine, spruce, and fir, were carried across rugged terrain without draft animals or wheeled transport. Why here? Why build so much in a place that seems to offer so little? Mainstream archaeology suggests that Chaco Canyon functioned as a regional hub, a center of ritual, trade, and governance linking dozens of outlying communities across the Four Corners region. A vast network of engineered roads radiated outward from the canyon, some stretching in near straight lines for miles, cutting through mesas and over uneven ground. These roads often lead not to settlements, but to empty landscapes, cliffs, or distant horizons. Their purpose remains debated. Were they symbolic pathways, used for processions or pilgrimages? Were they markers of territory and influence, or did they serve a function we no longer recognize? Inside the great houses, the story grows more complex. Many rooms show little evidence of daily domestic life. Instead, they appear to have been used for storage, ritual preparation, or seasonal gatherings. The great kivas, large, circular, semi-subterranean chambers, could accommodate hundreds of people and were clearly designed for communal ceremonies. Their construction required advanced knowledge of engineering, acoustics, and airflow. Astronomy also seems woven into Chaco's design. Certain structures align precisely with solar and lunar events. At Fajada Butte, a prominent rock formation rising from the canyon floor, shafts of sunlight pass through stone slabs to mark solstices and equinoxes. Even more puzzling is evidence suggesting awareness of the 18.6-year lunar standstill, a complex cycle that would require generations of careful observation to identify. How was such knowledge preserved and transmitted without a written language, and who was responsible for coordinating it? Some researchers propose that Chaco was the center of a powerful elite class, religious leaders or astronomer priests who governed through ritual authority rather than force. Others see it as a pilgrimage destination, where people gathered periodically rather than lived year-round. Isotopic studies of human remains suggest that some individuals buried at Chaco were not local, supporting the idea of long-distance movement tied to the canyon's significance. Yet there are signs of inequality that complicate the picture. Certain burials contain exotic goods, turquoise, shell, copper bells, and even cacao residue traced to Mesoamerica, items far removed from the local environment. These finds hint at trade networks spanning thousands of miles, and at social hierarchies not always emphasized in earlier interpretations of Puebloan culture. More speculative perspectives focus on the roads, the alignments, and the canyon's apparent planning as a single, integrated system. Was Chaco designed to mirror a cosmological map? Did its builders see the landscape as a living framework connecting earth, sky, and ancestry? Some fringe theories go further, questioning whether the level of coordination and precision suggests lost knowledge or external influence. While such ideas remain outside mainstream scholarship, they persist, fed by the sheer ambition of what remains. By the late 12th century, Chaco Canyon was largely abandoned. Extended drought, environmental strain, and social upheaval are often cited as contributing factors. Tree ring data confirms prolonged periods of reduced rainfall, which would have placed enormous pressure on food production. But environmental stress alone may not fully explain the sudden decline of such a deeply interconnected system. The people did not vanish. Descendant communities, including the Hopi, Zuni, and other Pueblo nations, maintain oral traditions that speak of migration, transformation, and sacred responsibility tied to Chaco. To them, the canyon is not a ruin, but a place that still holds meaning, one that must be approached with respect rather than conquest. Today, as shadows stretch across the great houses and the Milky Way reclaims the night sky, Chaco Canyon feels both present and distant. Its walls endure, its roads fade into desert, and its silence invites interpretation without offering confirmation. Like Por-Bazhyn, like Caral, Chaco resists simple answers. It stands as evidence of human intention on a scale that still challenges our assumptions. And as researchers continue to study its stones, its alignments, and its absences, the question remains quietly open. Was Chaco Canyon a center of power, a ceremonial gateway, or something more elusive, designed not just to be inhabited, but to be remembered? As the desert silence of Chaco Canyon recedes and its roads dissolve back into open sky, the journey turns once more, this time toward the western edge of the ancient world. The mystery follows, unchanged in tone but transformed in form. Where Chaco carved meaning into a vast landscape, another structure waits beneath a softer horizon, built not of cities or networks, but of stone placed with singular intent. In southern Spain, near the modern town of Antequera, a low earthen mound rises gently from the Andalusian plain. Olive groves stretch outward, and distant mountains frame the horizon. Nothing about the mound suggests grandeur at first glance. And yet, hidden within it lies one of the most imposing megalithic structures in Europe, the Dolmen of Menga. Stepping inside is a quiet confrontation with scale. Enormous stone slabs, some weighing more than 180 tons, form a long, narrow corridor that opens into a broad chamber. The ceiling presses low, held aloft by massive pillars that seem less constructed than summoned into place. The air is cool, sound softens. Light fades quickly as one moves inward, until the outside world feels distant, almost unreal. The Dolmen of Menga was built around 3700 BCE, thousands of years before the pyramids of Egypt and long before metal tools were widely used in the region. Its builders quarried and transported colossal stones, shaping and positioning them with extraordinary precision. How this was achieved remains one of the site's most persistent questions. There are no nearby quarries that clearly explain the movement of such immense blocks, nor definitive evidence of the tools or methods employed. Mainstream archaeology classifies Menga as a Neolithic burial monument, part of a broader tradition of megalithic construction found across Atlantic Europe. Human remains have been discovered within, suggesting a funerary function tied to ancestor veneration or communal memory. In this view, the dolmen served as a sacred space where the living interacted with the dead, reinforcing social bonds and shared identity. But Menga resists easy categorization. Unlike many other dolmens, which align with solar events such as equinoxes or solstices, the Dolmen of Menga is oriented toward a nearby natural feature, Peña de los Enamorados, a prominent mountain whose silhouette resembles a reclining human face. This choice appears deliberate. The axis of the structure points directly toward the mountain, not the rising sun. Why would a monumental tomb reject the sky in favor of the land? Some researchers suggest that Peña de los Enamorados held deep symbolic significance, perhaps regarded as a living presence, a mythic ancestor, or a marker of territorial identity. Nearby caves show evidence of prehistoric occupation, strengthening the idea that the mountain was sacred long before Menga was built. In this interpretation, the dolmen becomes part of a wider ritual landscape, connecting stone, earth, and memory. Yet the internal design adds further complexity. The size of the chamber, the use of supporting pillars, rare in dolmen construction, and the sheer ambition of the project imply a level of social organization that challenges traditional assumptions about Neolithic communities. This was not the work of a small, loosely connected group. It required planning, leadership, shared belief, and sustained cooperation over time. What kind of society could mobilize such effort? And for what purpose exactly? Some scholars propose that Menga was more than a tomb, that it functioned as a ceremonial space used repeatedly, perhaps for rites marking seasonal change, social transitions, or collective decision-making. The acoustics within the chamber are notable. Voices resonate, footsteps echo softly. Was sound part of the experience? Was the structure designed to alter perception, to separate those inside from the ordinary rhythms of life outside? More speculative theories look beyond function and toward intention. The alignment with the mountain, the monumental scale, and the inward journey from light to darkness have led some to interpret Menga as a symbolic passage, a threshold between worlds. In this reading, the dolmen is not merely a container for the dead, but a constructed experience, guiding participants through a physical and psychological transition. Others question whether the builders possessed forms of knowledge now lost. The engineering precision, the stability of the structure over millennia, and the apparent understanding of load distribution suggest an intuitive grasp of principles not formally recorded until much later. Was this knowledge passed orally? Was it guarded, ritualized, or restricted to certain members of the community? As with Chaco Canyon, the absence of written records leaves interpretation open. We see the outcome, but not the reasoning. We measure the stones, but not the beliefs that moved them. Over time, the Dolmen of Menga fell silent. Soil accumulated. The mound softened its outline. When it was rediscovered in the modern era, it stood as a reminder that complexity does not always announce itself with scale or ornament. Sometimes it hides beneath the ground, waiting to be entered rather than observed. Today, Menga is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, studied with modern tools and preserved with care. And yet, its core mystery remains intact. The stones do not explain themselves. They simply endure, balanced, aligned, and unmoved by the centuries that pass above them. Standing inside the chamber, facing inward rather than outward, one senses a familiar pattern repeating across cultures and continents. Like Chaco's great houses and Por-Bazhyn's silent walls, Menga suggests that ancient builders were not only solving practical problems, they were expressing ideas about life, death, landscape, and meaning that we can glimpse but not fully reconstruct. And so the question lingers, unanswered but persistent. Was the Dolmen of Menga built to honor the dead, to shape the living, or to communicate with something beyond both, something its builders believed was watching from the mountain beyond the stone? As the cool stone chamber of Menga recedes into memory, and its inward-facing silence gives way to open sky once more, the pattern continues. Stone shaped by human intention, meaning carved without words. This time the journey leads east, to a land where monuments were not hidden beneath earth, but raised toward the sun itself. Along the Nile, where architecture was inseparable from eternity, one monument was begun, and never allowed to rise. In the granite quarries of Aswan, beneath the relentless Egyptian sun, a colossal form lies embedded in the bedrock. At first glance, it appears as a natural ridge, split by fissures and shadows, but as the eye adjusts, its shape becomes unmistakable. Sharp edges, straight lines, a tapering form stretching more than 40 meters in length. This is the Unfinished Obelisk, the largest known obelisk ever attempted in ancient Egypt. Had it been completed, it would have weighed more than 1,000 tons, towering over any obelisk ever erected. Instead, it remains frozen in the moment of its creation, still attached to the living rock from which it was carved. No inscriptions mark its surface. No names claim it. It is an artifact not of completion, but of process. Archaeologists generally date the obelisk to the reign of Queen Hatshepsut around the 15th century BCE, a period of remarkable architectural ambition. Obelisks were sacred objects, symbolic rays of the sun god Ra, erected at temple entrances to bridge the divine and earthly realms. They were precision monuments, carved from single blocks of granite, transported hundreds of miles downriver, and raised upright with extraordinary accuracy. The Aswan quarries supplied many of these monuments. Tool marks remain visible in the stone, rounded grooves consistent with dolerite pounders, the primary tools believed to have been used to carve granite. According to mainstream explanations, workers would patiently hammer the stone, slowly freeing the obelisk from the surrounding bedrock over months or even years. But here, something went wrong. A large crack appeared along one side of the obelisk, rendering it structurally unstable. The flaw ran deep enough to compromise the entire monument. And so, the project was abandoned. The workers left, the tools were set down, and the obelisk was never moved. At least, that is the conventional explanation. Standing beside the unfinished obelisk, the scale becomes difficult to reconcile with the proposed methods. The trench surrounding it is narrow and precise. The flatness of the surfaces suggests controlled removal of material. The interior corners are sharply defined. For some observers, the marks resemble pounding. For others, they raise questions. How did workers maintain such straight lines over such enormous distances? How was stress managed within a single block of stone of this size? And how close were they to completion when the crack appeared? Some engineers have noted that the obelisk was remarkably far along in its extraction. Its underside had already been partially freed. This suggests confidence, an expectation that the stone would hold. Why attempt something so large if the risk of failure was so high? And why do we find no other obelisks of comparable size, completed or otherwise? Mainstream scholarship views the unfinished obelisk as evidence of both ambition and limitation, a rare glimpse into ancient construction practices and their boundaries. It demonstrates that the Egyptians tested their capabilities, learned from failure, and adjusted accordingly. Smaller obelisks, more manageable in size, were successfully completed and erected throughout Egypt. Yet the obelisk's very existence invites further speculation. Some researchers have proposed that the crack may not have been accidental, that it could have resulted from seismic activity, internal stress miscalculation, or even sudden temperature shifts in the granite. Others question whether the stone truly failed before completion, or whether the project was halted for reasons unrelated to engineering, political change, religious shifts, or the death of a patron. More fringe theories take a different approach altogether. They question whether the methods attributed to ancient workers fully explain what we see. The smoothness of certain surfaces, the uniform depth of cuts, and the efficiency implied by the scale have led some to suggest the use of techniques now lost or misunderstood. These ideas remain controversial and unsupported by direct evidence, but they persist, fueled by the silence of the stone itself. Unlike standing monuments, the unfinished obelisk cannot be admired from afar. It demands proximity. You walk alongside it. You trace its length. You see the work as it was left, incomplete and uncorrected. There is no symbolic polish here, only effort interrupted. In this way, the obelisk is different from the pyramids, from temples, from the raised monuments meant to inspire awe. It is raw, exposed, honest. And perhaps because of that, it raises more questions than structures meant to be seen only when finished. Why was this attempt made only once? Why does no inscription explain its purpose? Why did a civilization so skilled in stone leave behind a failure so monumental and preserve it rather than erase it? Over time, the quarry filled with sand and shadow. Dynasties rose and fell, empires passed, and the obelisk remained where it began, untouched by later builders, as if deliberately left for the future to find. Today, it lies open to the sky, studied by archaeologists, engineers, and visitors alike. Measurements are taken. Hypotheses are tested. And yet, no single explanation fully captures the intent behind it. Like Menga's inward-facing chamber, like Chaco's silent roads, the unfinished obelisk occupies a space between knowledge and uncertainty. It shows us what ancient builders attempted, but not everything they understood. And as we stand beside this immense form, still bound to the earth that shaped it, one question quietly endures. Was the unfinished obelisk a failed monument, or a message left behind, marking the outer edge of what its builders once believed was possible? As the immense granite form of the unfinished obelisk fades from view, still bound to the bedrock, suspended between intention and abandonment, the journey continues westward, across the Mediterranean. The questions remain the same, even as the landscape changes. Why were certain structures built the way they were? And why do some of them refuse to fit neatly into the histories written around them? In the northeastern Peloponnese of Greece, amid olive trees and low rolling hills, a small stone structure rises quietly near the modern village of Hellinikon. It does not dominate the land. It does not tower or gleam. In fact, it is easy to miss. Yet its shape is unmistakable. Sloping stone walls rise inward on all sides, forming a stepped silhouette that echoes a far more famous form. This is the Pyramid of Hellinikon. Unlike the monumental pyramids of Egypt, this structure stands only a few meters high. Its limestone blocks are modest in size, carefully fitted but unadorned. There are no hieroglyphs, no reliefs, no inscriptions to explain its purpose or proclaim its builders. And yet, for more than 2 centuries, it has provoked an outsized question. Why does a pyramid exist here, in Greece? The structure sits near the remains of an ancient road connecting Argos and Tegea, a route of strategic importance in antiquity. Its walls slope inward at a consistent angle, creating a form that is rare in Greek architecture. Inside, the space is narrow and enclosed, with a small chamber that offers no obvious clues as to how the building was used. Classical sources provide limited guidance. The ancient writer Pausanias mentions a pyramid-like structure in the region, describing it as a memorial to fallen soldiers from a mythical conflict between rival kings. This has led many scholars to interpret Hellinikon as a funerary monument or cenotaph, built to commemorate the dead rather than house them. From a mainstream archaeological perspective, the Pyramid of Hellinikon is generally dated to the late Classical or early Hellenistic period, around the 4th century BCE. In this view, it was likely constructed as a watchtower, guard post, or fortified marker along a key roadway. The inward-sloping walls may have served defensive purposes, offering stability and resistance to attack. Yet this explanation, while plausible, does not fully satisfy all observers. In the late 20th century, scientific dating methods introduced new uncertainty. Thermoluminescence tests conducted on the stone suggested a much earlier construction date, possibly as early as the 3rd millennium BCE. If accurate, this would place the pyramid centuries before the rise of classical Greek civilization, and roughly contemporaneous with Egypt's Old Kingdom. The results were controversial. Critics questioned the methodology, arguing that the stones could have been reused or exposed to heat in ways that skewed the data. Subsequent studies favored a later date, but the debate never fully settled. The structure remains caught between timelines, claimed by different eras depending on the lens applied. And then there is the question of form. Greek architecture is celebrated for its columns, its symmetry, its emphasis on open space and human scale. Pyramidal structures are not part of this tradition. Why then would Greek builders choose this shape at all? Was it purely functional, or did it carry symbolic meaning now lost to time? Some researchers suggest that the pyramid shape may have been independently conceived, an intuitive solution for stability and durability. Others wonder whether the form reflects cultural exchange, the result of ideas traveling across the Mediterranean through trade, migration, or shared myth. Egypt and Greece were not isolated worlds. Contacts existed, especially in later periods. But whether such influence extended to architectural form remains uncertain. More speculative interpretations step further into ambiguity. The pyramid's orientation, its proportions, and its placement within the landscape have drawn attention from those who study ancient geometry and sacred space. Was the structure aligned with celestial events? Was it part of a larger, now erased system of markers or monuments? There is no definitive evidence to support these ideas, but there is also little to conclusively dismiss them. Unlike grand temples or palaces, the Pyramid of Hellinikon offers no narrative reliefs, no decorative program to decode. It is mute. Its meaning must be inferred from context, comparison, and absence. And absence in archaeology can be as powerful as presence. The structure's survival itself is notable. Built of limestone blocks without mortar, it has endured earthquakes, erosion, and centuries of reuse and neglect. Its simplicity may be its strength, or it may reflect a purpose so specific that elaboration was unnecessary. Was it meant to be entered, or merely seen? Was it symbolic, practical, or both? And why does its shape continue to unsettle expectations? Standing before it, one is reminded of a recurring theme across ancient sites, that innovation does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it appears quietly, out of place, leaving just enough behind to suggest intention, but not enough to explain it. As with the Unfinished Obelisk, the Pyramid of Hellinikon represents a moment suspended, between cultures, between explanations, between what we think we know and what remains uncertain. It challenges the idea that architectural forms belong exclusively to single civilizations or linear histories. Today, the pyramid remains where it has always stood, surrounded by farmland and sky, largely unchanged. Scholars continue to measure, test, and debate. Visitors circle it slowly, tracing its angles, searching for meaning in stone. And as the light shifts across its sloping walls, the question lingers, quiet, unresolved, and persistent. Is the Pyramid of Hellinikon a local solution to a local need, or a fragment of a deeper story, one that hints at connections and knowledge still waiting to be uncovered? As the quiet geometry of the Pyramid of Hellinikon recedes, its sloping walls holding questions suspended between cultures, the journey continues farther west, to the edge of Europe, where land meets sea and stone disappears underground. The pattern remains familiar: structures that do not announce their purpose, spaces that resist certainty, places where human effort is undeniable, but explanation remains incomplete. Along the rugged coastlines and rolling fields of Cornwall, England, the ground itself begins to hollow. Beneath grassy hills and ancient farmsteads lie narrow passages of stone, twisting into darkness. From above, there is little to see: no towers, no monuments, only subtle depressions in the earth. But below the surface, something older waits. These are fogous. Fogous, also known as souterrains, are underground stone structures dating primarily to the Iron Age, roughly between 500 BCE and 400 CE. They are found almost exclusively in Cornwall, constructed from carefully stacked stone slabs without mortar. Their entrances are often hidden or modest, leading into long, low corridors that bend sharply, narrowing as they descend. To enter is to crouch, to move slowly, to leave daylight behind. The air inside is cool and still. Sound changes. Walls press close. Light fades within a few steps, and the sense of direction becomes uncertain. It is immediately clear that fogous were not designed for comfort or for everyday living. Archaeologists have identified several prominent examples, including Haligi Fogou and Carn Uni Fogou. These structures often appear in proximity to Iron Age settlements, yet they are not integrated into domestic spaces. Their construction required significant labor, planning, and stoneworking skill, and yet there is no consensus on why they were built. The most widely accepted explanation is practical. Fogous, some argue, served as storage chambers, particularly for grain and other perishable goods. Underground spaces offer stable temperatures and protection from moisture, making them ideal for preserving food. In a volatile climate, such storage could mean survival. But this explanation quickly encounters problems. Many fogous are poorly ventilated, some are damp, others are difficult to access with sharp turns and constricted passages that would complicate frequent use. And in several cases, there is little archaeological evidence, such as residue or debris, to confirm long-term storage. Another mainstream theory suggests that fogous functioned as places of refuge. During times of conflict or raiding, inhabitants could retreat underground, hiding from attackers. The narrow entrances and twisting corridors would have made pursuit difficult. This interpretation aligns with a period marked by tribal rivalries and shifting power. Yet again, questions arise. Most fogous lack clear defensive features. There are no barricades, no evidence of prolonged occupation during emergencies, no signs of fires or sustained sheltering. Some passages end abruptly, offering no obvious escape or defensive advantage. If these were hiding places, they were not particularly accommodating ones. And so, the mystery deepens. The experience of being inside a fogou is profoundly sensory. The constriction, the darkness, the silence, it alters perception. This has led some researchers to explore a more symbolic or ritual interpretation. Perhaps fogous were not meant to serve daily needs at all, but ceremonial ones. In this view, the descent underground may have carried meaning. Many ancient cultures viewed the earth as a living entity, a realm of ancestors, spirits, or transformation. Entering the ground could symbolize a journey between worlds, a ritual passage rather than a practical act. The effort required to build such spaces would then reflect belief, not necessity. Supporting this idea is the absence of clear utilitarian evidence and the careful, deliberate construction of spaces that seem designed to evoke disorientation and separation from the outside world. Some fogous widen into chambers, suggesting gathering rather than storage. Others align with nearby stone features, whose purposes are also debated. Still, no artifacts explicitly confirm ritual use. No carvings, no offerings, no written records, only stone and silence. More speculative interpretations step further into uncertainty. Some point to local folklore, stories of underground realms, hidden people, and liminal spaces where time behaves differently. While folklore cannot be treated as evidence, it raises an interesting question. Did these stories emerge because such places existed, or were such places built because these beliefs already did? Others examine fogous as part of a broader subterranean tradition found across Europe. Souterrains appear in Ireland, Scotland, and parts of France. But Cornish fogous are distinct in scale and design. Why did this region invest so heavily in underground architecture and then abandon it? By the late Roman period, fogous fell out of use. Entrances collapsed or were deliberately sealed. Above ground, life continued. Fields were plowed, settlements shifted, and the fogous were forgotten, their presence reduced to faint dips in the landscape. When they were rediscovered centuries later, they offered no answers, only access. Modern archaeologists map their dimensions, analyze their construction, and debate their purpose. Each theory explains part of the evidence, but none explains all of it. Storage does not fully account for design. Defense does not fit the constraints. Ritual cannot be proven. The fogous exist in the overlap between these explanations, belonging fully to none. What is clear is intention. These were not accidental spaces. They were not simple pits or natural caves. They were planned, engineered, and built with care. Someone decided they were worth the effort. Standing at the threshold of a fogou today, the outside world feels distant even before entering. The wind moves through grass, the sky stretches wide, and just below, a narrow opening invites descent, not with answers, but with presence. Like the Pyramid of Hellinikon, like the Unfinished Obelisk, fogous remind us that not all human achievements are meant to be seen, and not all knowledge is meant to be obvious. Some structures seem designed to withhold meaning, offering only experience in its place. And as the passage curves inward and the light disappears, one question follows quietly into the dark. Were fogous built to store things, to hide people, or to shape belief itself? And if so, what understanding did their builders carry that has since slipped beyond our reach? As the underground silence of the fogou recedes, its narrow stone corridors folding back into the earth, the journey turns eastward once again. From hidden chambers beneath green hills, we move toward open plains shaped by ancient rivers. The mystery remains, but it takes on a different scale. No longer confined to a single structure, it spreads across an entire civilization, planned, ordered, and then inexplicably lost. On the wide floodplains of the Indus River, beneath layers of dust and time, lie the ruins of Harappa. At first, the site appears understated. Low brick mounds stretch across the landscape, interrupted by eroded walls and shallow depressions. There are no towering pyramids, no colossal statues, no inscriptions carved into stone to announce greatness. And yet, as excavation reveals the pattern beneath the surface, a different kind of monument emerges. One built not for spectacle, but for precision. Harappa was one of the major urban centers of the Indus Valley Civilization, flourishing between roughly 2600 and 1900 BCE. At its height, this civilization covered an area larger than either ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, encompassing hundreds of cities and settlements across what is now Pakistan and northwestern India. And Harappa was among its earliest discovered and most influential sites. The city was laid out on a strict grid. Streets intersected at right angles. Bricks were standardized in size across vast distances, suggesting centralized planning and shared regulation. Homes were built with internal courtyards, private wells, and drainage systems that carried wastewater away through covered channels beneath the streets. The level of urban planning is striking, even by modern standards. Public and private spaces were clearly defined. Sanitation was not an afterthought, but a core feature of design. In a world where many ancient cities struggled with waste and disease, Harappa's engineers seemed to anticipate problems centuries before they were formally understood. Who organized this? And how was such uniformity maintained across an entire civilization? Mainstream archaeology views the Indus Valley Civilization as a highly organized, trade-driven society, governed not by kings or warrior elites, but possibly by councils, merchants, or priestly administrators. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, there are no palaces, no royal tombs, no monumental depictions of rulers asserting dominance. Power, if it existed, appears subtle, embedded in systems rather than symbols. Artifacts recovered from Harappa support this interpretation. Seals carved with intricate animal motifs and short inscriptions appear throughout the region, suggesting administration, trade, or ownership. Weights and measures are remarkably consistent, pointing to regulated commerce. Trade networks extended as far as Mesopotamia, where Indus goods were known and valued. And yet, one crucial element is missing. The Indus script, found on seals and pottery, remains undeciphered. It is short, repetitive, and resistant to all attempts at translation. Without it, the voices of Harappa's people remain silent. We can see what they built, but not how they explained themselves. This absence has shaped every mystery that follows. Despite its sophistication, Harappa shows little evidence of large-scale warfare. Weapons are scarce. Fortifications, where present, seem modest. Skeletal remains do not point to widespread violence. This raises a fundamental question. How did such a large, interconnected civilization maintain stability for centuries without obvious military dominance? Some scholars suggest that environmental balance played a role. The Indus River and its tributaries provided fertile land and predictable cycles, allowing agriculture to flourish without constant conflict. Others point to shared cultural norms, ritual cleanliness, standardized practices, and collective identity that reduced internal friction. But the environment, like power, is never permanent. Around 1900 BCE, the Indus Valley Civilization began to change. Cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were gradually abandoned. Urban planning deteriorated, standardization declined. Populations dispersed into smaller settlements. By 1700 BCE, the great cities were largely empty. Why? Mainstream explanations focus on climate change. Geological and archaeological evidence suggests shifts in monsoon patterns, river courses, and prolonged droughts. The Gagar-Hakra river system, possibly the lifeline of many Indus cities, may have dried up or changed course, undermining agriculture and trade. But climate alone may not tell the full story. There is no clear evidence of sudden collapse, no mass graves, no layers of destruction. Instead, Harappa seems to have faded, slowly, unevenly, and quietly. People adapted, migrated, and reorganized. The civilization did not end so much as dissolve. So more speculative theories have long surrounded this transition. Early interpretations proposed invasion or conquest, though these ideas have largely fallen out of favor due to lack of evidence. Others wonder whether internal social shifts, changes in belief systems, or the breakdown of trade networks played a role. Some fringe perspectives go further, questioning whether Harappa's apparent order reflects knowledge now lost, advanced urban theory, hydraulic engineering, or social organization that modern frameworks struggle to categorize. These ideas remain unproven, but they persist, driven by the sheer contrast between Harappa's sophistication and its disappearance. Walking through the ruins today, one is struck by what is not there. No temples dominating the skyline, no inscriptions declaring victory or divine favor, just bricks, carefully made, carefully placed, stretching across time. Like the fogous hidden beneath the earth, Harappa does not explain itself. It offers structure without narrative, achievement without authorship. Its mystery lies not in a single monument, but in an entire way of life that functioned at scale and then slipped beyond our understanding. Archaeologists continue to excavate, analyze, and debate. New technologies reveal buried streets and forgotten neighborhoods. Each discovery adds detail, but not closure. And as the sun sets over the Indus plain, casting long shadows across the ancient grid, a question remains suspended between past and present. Did the people of Harappa leave because their world could no longer support them, or because they understood something about change, adaptation, and impermanence that we are only beginning to rediscover? As the ordered streets of Harappa fade into the dust of the Indus plain, another pattern begins to surface, one that stretches far beyond rivers and deserts, beyond brick and script. The questions remain, but they travel north and west, carried by wind and sea, until they reach the edge of the Atlantic world. Here, meaning is not written or carved in towering monuments, but built into the earth itself. On the western coast of the Orkney Islands, where the North Sea meets the land with unrelenting force, a low expanse of grass-covered stone lies pressed against the shoreline. The wind is constant. The sky shifts rapidly. Waves break against the rocks below with a rhythm older than memory. At first glance, the place appears almost natural, an uneven rise in the ground shaped by centuries of weather. But beneath the turf, an ancient village waits. This is Skara Brae. Discovered in 1850 after a violent storm stripped away layers of earth, Skara Brae is one of the best-preserved Neolithic settlements in Europe. Its stone houses, buried for thousands of years beneath sand and soil, emerged with their walls intact, their interiors frozen in time. What the sea revealed was not a ruin in the conventional sense, but a lived-in space, intimate, deliberate, and unexpectedly sophisticated. Skara Brae dates back to around 3200 BCE, making it older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids of Egypt. At least 8 houses are connected by low, covered passageways, forming a compact community designed to shelter its inhabitants from the harsh northern climate. The walls are thick. The entrances are narrow. Everything is built low to the ground, as if to resist the wind rather than challenge it. Inside each house, the details are striking. Stone beds line the walls. A central hearth marks the heart of the home. Shelving, storage boxes, and even dressers, carefully constructed from stone, stand exactly where they were placed over 5 millennia ago. There is no wood left behind, no textiles, no organic remains beyond traces. And yet, the arrangement feels familiar, almost modern. This was not a primitive camp. It was a planned settlement. Mainstream archaeology sees Skara Brae as a permanent Neolithic village, home to farming communities who cultivated crops, raised animals, and lived here year-round. Pottery fragments, tools, and jewelry suggest daily life, cooking, crafting, social exchange. The design of the houses indicates an understanding of insulation, airflow, and communal layout well suited to the environment. But as with Harappa, what is missing becomes as important as what remains. There are no defensive walls, no weapons, no signs of hierarchy. All houses are similar in size and layout, implying a relatively egalitarian society. There is no central structure to suggest a ruler or elite class. Power, if it existed, left no architectural trace. How did such a community organize itself? And what beliefs shaped its design? The village's location raises further questions. Skara Brae sits close to the sea today, vulnerable to erosion and storms. Was it always so exposed? Some evidence suggests that when it was first built, the shoreline lay farther away, protected by dunes. Over time, environmental change may have altered the landscape, slowly bringing the ocean closer. Climate, once again, enters the story. Around 2500 BCE, Skara Brae was abandoned. The reasons remain uncertain. A gradual shift in climate could have made farming more difficult. Rising seas may have eroded protective landforms, or social changes, migration, integration with other communities, may have drawn people elsewhere. There is no evidence of violence, no signs of sudden destruction. Like Harappa, Skara Brae seems to have been left deliberately, its inhabitants carrying what they could and sealing the rest beneath sand. But the precision of what was left behind invites deeper inquiry. Some archaeologists note that the village layout reflects a strong sense of order and symmetry. The entrances face inward, toward shared spaces, suggesting a focus on community rather than defense. The stone furniture is standardized, its placement consistent from house to house. This level of uniformity implies shared norms, perhaps even shared beliefs about how space should be lived in. Nearby sites deepen the mystery. Orkney is rich in Neolithic monuments. The Ring of Brodgar, the Stones of Stennis, and the massive ceremonial complex at Ness of Brodgar. These structures suggest that the islands were not isolated outposts, but centers of ritual and gathering. Was Skara Brae part of a larger sacred landscape? Did its inhabitants participate in ceremonies that connected domestic life with cosmic cycles, much like those seen at Chaco Canyon or Caral? Some researchers have explored astronomical alignments in nearby monuments, raising the possibility that the people of Orkney possessed a sophisticated understanding of time, seasons, and celestial patterns. While Skara Brae itself does not clearly align with solar events, its proximity to ritual sites suggests a cultural continuity between daily life and ceremonial expression. More speculative interpretations consider the psychological experience of the village. The low ceilings, enclosed passages, and inward-facing design create a sense of separation from the outside world. Was this purely practical or symbolic? Did living partially underground reflect a worldview that emphasized protection, ancestry, or connection to the earth? As with Fogous, the act of moving through Skara Brae alters perception. One does not simply walk into the village. One descends. One passes through thresholds. Light narrows. Sound softens. The village feels less like a place imposed on the landscape and more like a place grown from it. There is also the question of knowledge transmission. How did Neolithic communities across vast distances, Orkney, the Indus Valley, Iberia, develop such different architectures yet share underlying principles of planning, standardization, and environmental adaptation? Were these ideas independently discovered, or do they point to deeper, slower-moving currents of human understanding? Skara Brae offers no answers in words. There are no inscriptions, no symbols carved into stone, only space, arrangement, and absence. Today, the village stands exposed once more, protected by seawalls and studied with care. Visitors walk its paths, peer into its rooms, and imagine lives lived in firelight and shadow. The wind still howls, the sea still advances, time continues its quiet work, and as the stones endure, beds still aligned, hearths still centered, the mystery remains intact. Skara Brae shows us how people lived, but not why they chose this place, this design, this way of being. So the question lingers, carried on the northern wind. Was Skara Brae simply a practical response to a harsh environment, or was it the physical expression of a worldview that understood shelter, community, and time in ways we have yet to fully comprehend? As the windswept shores of Orkney and the stone-lined streets of Skara Brae fade from memory, our exploration turns once more to the vast interior of a different continent. Here, amid arid mesas, deep canyons, and sun-bleached cliffs, human ingenuity left its mark in stone and earth. But unlike Skara Brae or Harappa, the story is incomplete. It is a story defined not only by what remains, but by what was abruptly abandoned, leaving behind more questions than answers. In the Four Corners region of the American Southwest, where Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico meet, a landscape of red rock cliffs and winding rivers holds the legacy of a people known today as the Ancestral Puebloans, or more commonly, the Anasazi. For centuries, they carved homes and communities into cliffs, built towering pueblos, and cultivated fields in arid soils, creating a network of settlements remarkable in both scale and sophistication. Mesa Verde, Chaco Canyon, and countless smaller sites testify to a society that thrived between roughly 900 and 1300 CE. Multi-story dwellings constructed of stone and adobe cling to canyon walls, connected by narrow passageways and ceremonial kivas, subterranean chambers that hint at spiritual life. Roads stretch for miles, linking settlements across vast distances. Water control systems and terraced fields demonstrate intimate knowledge of a harsh, unforgiving environment. Here, architecture and landscape are intertwined. Ingenuity meets endurance. Yet, around the late 13th century, these communities were abandoned. The once bustling pueblos fell silent. The cliff dwellings, the roads, the granaries, all were left behind. And, remarkably, there is no single record, no direct account of why. The disappearance of the Anasazi remains one of North America's most enduring archaeological mysteries. Mainstream explanations offer a variety of practical factors. Climatic change is foremost among them. Dendrochronology, the study of tree rings, reveals an extended period of drought across the region during the 12th and 13th centuries. Crops failed, water sources dwindled, and the fragile balance of life in the desert began to unravel. Famine, it is suggested, may have forced migration to more hospitable areas. Conflict is another possibility. Archaeological evidence shows some signs of fortification, but large-scale violence is difficult to verify. Was there inter-community warfare over scarce resources? Or did social structures simply fracture under the pressure of environmental stress? The answers remain elusive. Yet even these plausible explanations do not fully account for the mystery. The Anasazi did not scatter randomly. Evidence suggests migration was organized, purposeful, and perhaps even ritualized. They moved southward toward present-day New Mexico and Arizona, integrating into existing communities or founding new ones. Their departure was deliberate, not chaotic. And their cliff dwellings, meticulously constructed and well supplied, were left largely intact, as if the structures themselves were abandoned with care rather than desperation. Some researchers explore the role of social and spiritual factors. Kivas, petroglyphs, and ceremonial plazas indicate that ritual played a central role in Anasazi life. Could social upheaval, shifts in religious practice, or communal decisions about sacred land have influenced the departure? Did the movement represent a spiritual journey as much as a practical one? Speculative interpretations add further intrigue. Certain researchers note astronomical alignments within major Anasazi sites. Roads and structures sometimes correspond to solstices or celestial events, suggesting sophisticated understanding of the sky. Could celestial phenomena, rare comets, drought-related observations, or long-term calendrical cycles have factored into decision-making? There is no definitive evidence, but the patterns invite questions. Another curious aspect of the disappearance is its suddenness. While environmental and social pressures build gradually, the archaeological record suggests a relatively rapid abandonment of major centers like Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde. How could such a large, interconnected society dissolve so quickly and efficiently, leaving homes, roads, and ceremonial spaces behind, yet preserving enough knowledge to survive elsewhere? This juxtaposition of planning and sudden withdrawal adds to the enigma. Artifacts left behind also hint at both continuity and disruption. Pottery, tools, and personal items appear largely intact, yet many communities show signs of truncated activity, unfinished construction, abrupt cessation of domestic chores, and scattered remains in storage areas. Life paused mid-action, frozen in stone and dust. It is a silence that speaks as loudly as any inscription. In many ways, the Anasazi Disappearance resonates with other mysteries explored in this journey, from Harappa's quiet fading to the hidden passages of Fogous. Each presents a civilization at its height, skilled, organized, and adaptive, followed by a departure or transformation that challenges our understanding. The question is not merely what happened, but why humans capable of remarkable ingenuity would abandon it so completely. Modern archaeology continues to probe the puzzle. Excavations, remote sensing, and climate modeling provide ever more detail, yet no single narrative fully accounts for the Anasazi exodus. The answer may lie in a complex interplay of environment, society, and belief, an interplay that resists simple explanation. Standing today at the edge of a mesa, overlooking a cliffside pueblo, the imagination is inevitably drawn to the lives once lived here. Children ran through narrow passageways. Families gathered around hearths. Ceremonies marked cycles of planting, harvest, and celestial events. And then, slowly, deliberately, people rose and departed, leaving stone walls as mute witnesses to their knowledge and resilience. The Anasazi Disappearance remains both tangible and elusive. Every stone, every kiva, every fragment of pottery is a clue, but not a key. And as the wind sweeps across the desert canyons, carrying dust and echoes of the past, the question endures. How did an advanced, thriving civilization vanish from its homeland so completely? And what insights might their journey still hold about human adaptation, resilience, and the fragile balance between people and their environment? As the arid canyons of the American Southwest fade behind us, their stories of abrupt departures and vanished communities lingering like whispers in the wind, our journey returns to a landscape shaped by both the Nile and the sun, a place where stone rises sharply from sand, and where human ambition once reached heights that still defy full understanding. Here, the desert stretches endlessly, broken only by clusters of pyramids, their narrow angles cutting the horizon with uncanny precision. This is Meroë. Nestled in modern-day Sudan, Meroë was the heart of the ancient kingdom of Kush, a civilization that flourished for nearly a millennium along the banks of the Nile, from roughly 800 BCE to 350 CE. Unlike the monumental pyramids of Egypt, whose grandiose slopes dominate the landscape, the pyramids of Meroë are slender, steep, and enigmatic. They rise in neat rows across a desert plain, their small bases and towering peaks creating an otherworldly skyline that seems both familiar and subtly alien. At first glance, the pyramids suggest tombs, monuments to rulers who wielded power in a distant, long-lost era. Indeed, these structures are burial sites, marking the graves of kings, queens, and nobles. Yet their design and scale immediately provoke questions. Unlike the Egyptian pyramids, which often boast colossal size and intricate interior chambers, Meroë's pyramids are comparatively modest in base, often only a fraction of the footprint of their northern neighbors. Yet they reach steep, precise heights, with sharply angled faces that seem to defy the gravity of time itself. What drove the Kushites to favor this style, so radically distinct from the pyramids of their predecessors? Was it purely aesthetic, functional, symbolic, or a combination of all three? Archaeological studies suggest that Meroë was more than a necropolis. It was a thriving city, complete with temples, palaces, and workshops, supported by trade routes that connected sub-Saharan Africa with Egypt and the Mediterranean. Iron smelting flourished here, and the region became renowned for its skilled artisans who shaped bronze, gold, and iron into tools, jewelry, and ceremonial objects. The kingdom's wealth and cultural sophistication challenge any simplistic notion of peripheral African civilizations during antiquity. And yet, despite this richness, many details of daily life remain obscured, hidden beneath sands that shift with the centuries. The Meroë Pyramids also reveal mysteries of construction. Stones were carefully cut, fitted, and stacked with precision. Many pyramids feature small chapels or offering rooms at their bases, with walls that once bore reliefs now eroded by wind and sand. Inscriptions occasionally appear, recording names, titles, or rituals, yet many texts remain fragmentary, leaving the full story tantalizingly out of reach. Scholars debate the specific religious and cultural practices associated with these burials. What role did the afterlife play in the Kushite worldview? How did these practices evolve under the influence of Egyptian, African, and indigenous traditions? The scale and density of the Meroë Pyramids evoke another question. Why did the Kushites build so many in such close proximity over centuries? Was the proliferation of these steep pyramids a conscious display of dynastic power, a way to mark sacred geography? Or did it hold a more esoteric, perhaps spiritual significance, one we cannot fully reconstruct? Speculative interpretations occasionally surface. Some researchers note that the orientation of the pyramids may correspond to celestial events, alignments with solstices or cardinal directions that suggest the Kushites observed the heavens with meticulous attention. Could the steep angles and precise layout reflect astronomical knowledge, encoded in stone to guide ritual or agricultural cycles? Alternatively, might the sheer repetition of the pyramids across the plains serve as a visual language, a landscape-scale expression of authority, cosmology, or collective memory? The construction of these monuments also prompts practical questions. Unlike Egyptian pyramids, which used massive labor forces and complex internal engineering, Meroë's pyramids are smaller but sharper, demanding a different approach to stability and materials. How did the builders maintain structural integrity across centuries in an environment prone to erosion and shifting sands? And how did knowledge of construction techniques pass from one generation to the next, sustaining a tradition of consistent style over hundreds of years? Seemingly, even today, the Meroë Pyramids evoke a sense of awe and subtle unease. Their slender silhouettes rise above desert plains, seemingly fragile yet enduring, quietly resisting complete comprehension. Tourists and scholars alike are struck by the interplay of geometry, light, and shadow across the stepped angles, and by the realization that an entire civilization, the rulers, artisans, and everyday citizens, once thrived here, leaving a legacy that is only partially visible. Modern archaeology continues to peel back layers of history. Excavations reveal artifacts, inscriptions, and traces of habitation that illuminate aspects of Kushite life, trade, and ritual. Yet the deeper mysteries persist. The full extent of their spiritual practices, the nuances of their governance, the specific motivations behind the design of the pyramids, and the social dynamics that sustained the kingdom for centuries, all remain partially obscured, half remembered by stone and sand. Standing on the edge of the Meroë necropolis, the wind sweeping across the desert, one is compelled to reflect on both achievement and disappearance. These pyramids, steep and precise, communicate ambition, faith, and authority. But they also communicate absence. Time has taken its toll, yet the monuments endure, silent witnesses to a civilization that navigated rivers, deserts, and human experience with remarkable ingenuity. And as the sun sets over the Nile's distant waters, casting long shadows across the sand, one question remains, unspoken but pressing. Why did the Kushites choose this specific form, these angles, this layout? And what deeper understanding of life, death, and the cosmos did they hope to preserve in the enduring geometry of the Meroë Pyramids? As the sun sets over the desert plains of Meroë, where pyramids rise in silent testament to a civilization's ambition and faith. Our journey moves across continents once more, tracing the echoes of human ingenuity and the mysteries left behind. From the Nile to the Mississippi, the evidence of organized monumental societies emerges in unexpected places, challenging assumptions about the scale and complexity of pre-Columbian life in North America. Here, amid fertile river valleys and wooded floodplains, lies Cahokia, a city of earth, not stone, yet no less remarkable or enigmatic. The Cahokia Mounds, located near present-day Collinsville, Illinois, stretch across the floodplain of the Mississippi River, their grassy summits rising gently but persistently above the landscape. At first glance, they seem like natural hills, subtle undulations in an otherwise flat expanse. Yet closer inspection reveals deliberate construction. Earthen platforms, steep-sided pyramidal mounds, and intricate geometric arrangements covering nearly 6 square miles. At its peak, Cahokia was the largest urban center north of Mexico, home to perhaps 10,000 to 20,000 people, with populations concentrated atop monumental mounds, clustered around plazas and thoroughfares that suggest careful planning and social organization. The largest of these mounds, Monk's Mound, dominates the site. Rising over 100 feet above the plain and stretching 1,000 feet along its base, it was built entirely from earth, layered and compacted with astonishing skill. Archaeologists estimate that millions of cubic feet of soil were moved by human hands over generations, shaping a platform large enough to support structures, likely elite residences, temples, or council houses. Standing at its summit, one can imagine a commanding view of the surrounding city, its streets, plazas, and smaller mounds arranged with geometric precision, a testament to both ambition and communal effort. Cahokia thrived from approximately 1050 to 1350 CE, a period during which it became a cultural and political hub of the Mississippian tradition. Trade networks spanned hundreds of miles, linking Cahokia to distant regions through the exchange of copper, shell, pottery, and other goods. Artifacts suggest a society rich in ritual and symbolism, with elaborate ceremonial practices that likely reinforced social hierarchies and communal identity. Yet, unlike contemporary civilizations in Mesoamerica, Cahokia left no written records. Its history must be reconstructed entirely from earthworks, artifacts, and the faint whispers of oral tradition passed down through generations. The sheer scale of Cahokia's construction raises profound questions. How did a pre-industrial society coordinate labor on such a massive scale, moving enormous quantities of earth without metal tools or draft animals? What social, religious, or political systems sustained this effort across decades? And how were priorities determined? Why build Monk's Mound here? Why orient plazas in precise alignments? Why cluster smaller mounds in particular patterns? Mainstream interpretations suggest that Cahokia was a hierarchical, theocratic society, ruled by elite leaders whose power was reinforced by religious ritual. Mounds may have served as platforms for temples, residences, or ceremonial spaces, reinforcing social stratification and connecting the people to cosmological beliefs. Alignments of certain mounds with celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, and lunar cycles point to an understanding of astronomy, ritualized timekeeping, and a desire to integrate the heavens into the urban landscape. Yet, as with so many ancient sites, mysteries abound. Evidence suggests sudden population decline and partial abandonment by the mid-14th century, long before European contact. Archaeologists debate the causes: environmental degradation from deforestation, overhunting, or soil depletion, climatic shifts that affected agriculture, social upheaval or internal conflict. The city's decline appears gradual in some respects, but punctuated by abrupt disruptions in settlement patterns, leaving questions about the resilience and adaptability of its society. The lack of written records intensifies the enigma. While artifacts such as finely crafted pottery, carved figurines, and exotic trade items hint at a complex society with spiritual and political sophistication, the intentions behind architectural choices, ceremonial practices, and societal organization remain largely speculative. Was Cahokia's urban plan guided primarily by religious cosmology, by practical governance, or by a combination of both? How did knowledge of construction, astronomy, and agriculture spread and endure across generations? Some fringe theories suggest even more provocative possibilities, drawing parallels with other monumental sites worldwide. The precision of mound alignments, the scale of labor required, and the social coordination implied evoke questions about whether Cahokia was part of a broader global pattern of early urban complexity, a notion debated and largely speculative, yet persistent in the minds of those drawn to the mystery of monumental human achievement. Walking among the mounds today, the contours of Monk's Mound and the surrounding platforms evoke a landscape both familiar and alien. One senses the pulse of a city long silent, children running along paths that no longer exist, families gathering around hearths atop earthen platforms, priests or leaders performing rituals that once ordered the cosmos itself. The earth retains the memory of these lives, but not their words. It is a testimony to ingenuity and impermanence, to societal ambition and the fragility of even the most carefully structured civilizations. Archaeologists continue to study Cahokia with ever more sophisticated tools. Ground-penetrating radar, LiDAR surveys, and soil analysis reveal hidden structures and previously undetected features beneath the surface. Yet, for all the new insights, the fundamental questions persist. Why was Cahokia abandoned, so abruptly yet incompletely? What cultural knowledge and traditions were lost in the departure? How did the city's designers conceive of space, ritual, and power in a way that remains inscrutable to us today? As the wind sweeps across the mounds, carrying dust and echoes of the past, one cannot help but feel the presence of a vanished civilization. The earth hums with the efforts of generations, the ambition of builders who transformed riverine plains into a city of monumental scale. And yet, the human story encoded in these mounds, its social structures, beliefs, and choices, remains partially hidden, waiting for those willing to walk among the earthworks, to trace the outlines of streets, plazas, and platforms, and to imagine what life, and perhaps even meaning, might have been like in a city whose memory has survived only in the contours of the land itself.